Yesterday we looked at the end of the war and when VE Day happened, and also the invasion of Germany. So we've looked at how we were able to have the end of the war and also the more significant role that Canadians played in terms of the participation in the battles that helped to invade Germany and end Germany's conquest over France. So, in many ways, the United States still felt that they had a conflict to settle with, I guess you could say, Japan. If you do recall, when we were talking about battles, Japan decided to attack by surprise the coast of Pearl Harbor, which is on the coast of Hawaii, and it was a military base. A lot of military soldiers lost their lives. They were innocent. They were attacked unknowingly. And what ended up happening as a result was that was the entryway into the American participation into World War II, which helped to end our war. So kind of like the knights in shining armor, I guess you could say. So the U.S. still felt that they had to score to settle with Japan, and they go ahead and they decide that Harry Truman at the time was president, and he thinks that he's justified in using the atomic bomb. While many in the United States went against it, and it was a huge point of contention for the world when they had decided to go ahead, especially for the Allied powers, because it was what they did, and many felt as though Truman was not justified in using the atomic bomb because it ended up attacking more civilians than anyone else, whereas others felt as though they were justified because they were just basically retaliating on their bomb. So Truman decides to drop 2 atomic bombs, one on Hiroshima and one in Nagasaki. You can see over here that here's a map of Japan and also where those atomic bombs were hit. And again, they were attacked unknowingly for doing so. So they decided to name the bombs Fat Man and Little Boy. And at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945 is when they dropped Little Boy. And by 11:02 a.m., they drop Fat Man on Nagasaki. And by noon on August 15th, 1945, Emperor Hirohito decides that he will surrender and tell the people of Japan that the war is now officially over and they are out of it. It was pretty atrocious because the bombs ended up killing 140,000 people in Hiroshima and 80,000 in Nagasaki by the end of 1945. And some of them were slow deaths from the radiation impact of the nuclear bomb. Among these, 50 to 20% died from injuries with combined effects of flash burns, psychological trauma, radiation burns, compounded by illness and malnutrition and radiation sickness. Because alongside the atomic bomb hurting civilians, it also killed out all of their crops. It was very difficult for them to access resources for their population. Since then, more have died and continue to die from cancer, exposure to radiation, and leukemia, and both cities, most of the dead were civilians. So why did we end up winning World War II, and what was the Allied superiority over the Axis powers? Was that we had better weapons, we invested more in our war effort, we had more soldiers, we were more strategic in using the technology we had available to us. We really learned a lot of lessons from World War I. We focused more so on soldiers' conditions and fighting, and also we didn't use trenches, which also helps as well. World War II had killed over 60 million people, which ended up being 2.5% of the world's population. Canada specifically lost 45,000 lives to the war, and we spent $10 billion. But the Germans almost spent nothing because they used all of the assets that they had collected when marginalizing the Jewish community, and they ended up being evened out, guess you could say, with the war efforts.